The trouble, Miss Calder. Redwood Gulch was the kind of town that survived on dust, gossip, and whatever story made the day feel less empty. So when Clara May Calder arrived alone, unchaperoned, and wearing trousers, it took less than an hour for the town to decide she was trouble. Clara, however, had only come to claim her late uncle's boarding house and leave as quietly as she'd arrived. Unfortunately, Redwood Gulch had other plans, and they all involved watching her very closely. Sheriff Luke Merriweather hated two things: disorder and stories that grew legs. Calm, broad-shouldered, and famously unromantic, Luke prided himself on keeping Redwood Gulch predictable. Clara's arrival shattered that. By sunset he'd heard she was a gambler, a runaway bride, and possibly a spy. When Luke finally met her, she was scrubbing a porch with her sleeves rolled up, hardly the image of scandal. Still, the town buzzed, and Luke knew better than to ignore it. Clara's inherited boarding house came with crooked stairs, leaky pipes, and tenants who offered unsolicited advice as payment for rent. They adored her immediately. She fixed what she could, laughed when things broke anyway, and refused to act ashamed of anything. The problem was that her kindness only fueled the rumors. Redwood Gulch couldn't imagine a woman like her without a dramatic backstory, and so they invented one. Luke came by under the excuse of inspecting the premises. What he found instead was Clara balancing on a chair, arguing with a curtain rod. He caught her before she fell, their faces far too close, the moment lingering longer than either intended. When they separated, flustered and stiff, both pretended nothing happened. The town, watching through windows, decided something very much had. A misunderstanding at the general store. Clara, laughing too loudly with Luke, turned into a full-blown scandal by supper. By nightfall, Redwood Gulch was convinced Clara and the sheriff were secretly involved. Clara was mortified. Luke was furious. But when the town began treating her with suspicion, Luke realized the rumors were doing real harm. Against his better judgment, he offered a solution neither of them liked. If the town believed they were courting, they might stop inventing worse stories. It was temporary, sensible, entirely professional, Clara agreed, mostly because she refused to let gossip chase her away again. They set rules: no touching, no private feelings, no pretending after sunset. The first rule lasted a day. Fake courting turned out to require an alarming amount of proximity. Walks through town, dinners at the boarding house. Luke learning Clara took her coffee too sweet. Clara discovering Luke secretly loved terrible poetry. Their banter softened into something warmer, their smiles lingering just a bit too long. Redwood Gulch was delighted. Clara and Luke were confused. One evening, beneath lantern light, Luke danced with Clara on the boarding house porch. The music was off-key, the moment imperfect hand, completely real. When Luke kissed her, it wasn't part of the plan. The realization hit them both at once. This was no longer pretending, and that terrified them more than the rumors ever had. Clara's past finally arrived in the form of an ex-employer demanding she return to a life she'd escaped. Luke overheard enough to believe the rumors had been true all along. Hurt and guarded, he pulled away, retreating behind duty and distance. Clara, tired of being misunderstood, refused to explain herself to someone who wouldn't ask. Redwood Gulch, shocked by the sudden chill between its favorite almost couple, began to realize its role in the mess. The same voices that once whispered now defended Clara fiercely. For the first time, the town questioned its own stories. Clara, meanwhile, prepared to leave boarding house, sold, heart bruised, pride intact. Luke finally sought the truth, instead of assuming it. When he learned how wrong he'd been, he didn't make excuses. He apologized fully, honestly, without expecting forgiveness. Clara listened. She didn't soften right away. But she didn't leave, either. This time, there was no pretending. Luke admitted he'd fallen in love somewhere between the lies and the laughter. Clara confessed she'd been braver here than she'd ever been before because of him. They agreed to try, openly, imperfectly, and with no concern for gossip. When a real threat hit Redwood Gulch land, dispute that endangered the boarding house, Clara and Luke stood together. Clara negotiated fiercely. Luke defended relentlessly. The town watched as rumor turned into respect. The boarding house thrived. Clara stayed. Luke smiled more. Redwood Gulch learned that stories could heal as easily as they could harm if told with care. Clara's name became synonymous not with trouble, but with courage. Under the same porch lanterns, where everything began, Luke asked Clara to stay for good. No lies, no pretending, just a life built on shared laughter and hard-earned trust. Clara said yes, knowing this time the story was hers to tell. 10 years later, Redwood Gulch no longer woke up afraid of silence. Morning light spilled down Main Street in a gentler way now, catching on freshly painted doors and flower boxes where dust once ruled. The boarding house still stood straighter than before, its porch wide and welcoming, but it had grown into something more than an inheritance. It had become a landmark, a place people pointed to and said, "That's where things changed." Clara May Calder. Meriwether leaned against the porch railing, a mug warming her hands, watching the town stretch itself awake. Her hair was threaded with silver now, not from age so much as from living fully, and she wore it proudly. Inside the boarding, like an SUBCRIBES. Aurora Tale Wild West. God bless.